Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the intro. I didn't understand anything, and I heard some laughs, so hopefully it was because of a good cause. So yeah, I'm Yannick Kwik, and I'm the director of Fuckup Nights. What is Fuckup Nights? Have you guys ever attended a Fuckup Night? Can you lift your hand if you ever attended a Fuckup Night? Okay, I see a few hands. Is this a clicker? There you go. We always have to do a fuck-up in our conferences. So I like to explain Fuckup Nights with one image, which is the one that's going to show up here. So in the first image, we can see what companies look like, what people talk about their companies, and how everyone perceives companies around the world. But in reality, companies look a little bit more like the second image. And at Fuckup Nights, we try to talk about those stories that are a bit more vulnerable, more real, more human. And it all started in Mexico City in 2012, when the 5 co-founders were having some mezcal, which is a kind of handmade tequila. And they got vulnerable and tipsy, and they started sharing their own failure stories. And they found out that even though they were all very good friends, they didn't know that each of them had a business failure story. And it sounded interesting. They had one of the most meaningful business conversations ever. And they say, why shouldn't we just replicate this conversation but open it to the public so people can come in and join us and have 3 speakers on stage. They could share a failure story using 10 images in 7 minutes. And they said, okay, let's wait for tomorrow. Maybe we're too drunk. And they met the day after, and indeed, they agreed that it was a very good idea, and they launched the first Fuckup Night ever. So they bought some beers. They invited 5 friends, each of them. They had 3 speakers on stage, and it was a success. People loved it. And it started to happen on a regular basis, every month in Mexico City, as an almost underground event. So they didn't have social media platforms, they didn't have anything. It was basically word of mouth. Until they opened up social media platforms, and other cities in the world approached the founders and asked them if they could replicate that format in a different city. And slowly, it started to pick up. And right now, Fuckup Nights is present in 250 cities in 80 countries, which represents 40% of the world. And talking about numbers, only last year we had more than 800 events. More than 100,000 people attended our events. Almost 2,500 speakers shared their story. That's just last year, but we have way more stories than that. And we had Fuckup Nights in 27 different languages. And people ask us, how do you guys survive? Like, don't you fuck up all the time? And we do. And how do we make money? So at the beginning, we didn't make money at all. Then we started charging a very small membership fee to the cities that were organizing Fuckup Nights that covered certain part of our operations. We've worked with sponsors as well, but it's a bit hard. There's a lot of events out there. But slowly, companies started to approach us to ask us if we could replicate these sessions that are on a monthly basis in those 250 cities, and they are open to the public and pretty much always free and with free drinks, etc. So if we could translate this into a corporate environment and do Fuckup Nights for companies, sometimes with external speakers from relevant industries for them, or sometimes with internal speakers where we train those speakers on how to speak transparently, honestly, with a feet in the ground about their fuck-ups. And those are a number of the companies we've worked with, but we also do something different, which is research. The Failure Institute is the research arm of Fuckup Nights, and it started when someone asked us, hey, why do companies fail in Mexico? Do you know what are the most common reasons behind business failure in Mexico? You must know because you've heard thousands of stories. And to be honest, we had no idea. We had some notions about what we heard at our events, like contracts. People fail because they sign contracts they shouldn't, and be careful with those. Or because they don't sign contracts and basically they hand over the company to their partner. Or people fail because they launch too early. Sometimes you, like her. Sometimes you have a deadline, you need to commit to a deadline because you already covered certain costs and your product or service is not ready, but you still need to commit to that deadline. Then you just launch and you get smashed like our friend. Or problems with business partner and teams. That happens all the time. But those were, as I said before, assumptions. That wasn't a data-driven answer to that person. And we felt curious, and we decided to really study the causes behind business failure in Mexico. So we partnered up with a sponsor, we partnered up with a research center, and we did that study and we published it in a book called, obviously, the Fuckup Book. And it was a success, mainly because it's free. So, like, everybody has it. But also because a lot of companies around the world and business incubators and accelerators, governments, universities, and development banks found the research extremely interesting, and they asked us to replicate it in a different country or in a different industry or just in one gender, et cetera, et cetera. And this is how the Failure Institute was born as the research arm of Fuckup Nights. And one of our most ambitious projects right now is the Global Failure Index. I'd say is the platform with most cases of business failure in the world. And it's an interactive, real-time map where you can just zoom in any part of the world and get as close as to a country, to a city, or even to a street, and see why companies are failing right there. You can also see if they received public investment or private investment and how much. You can also see how much money did they owe when they had to shut their activities. You can also filter by industry, by gender, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what is failure? There might be as many definitions of failure as people are in this hall. And for most of people in the world, failure is the opposite of success. But then if we need to define success, again, we have millions of definitions. What is success? Is it having money and no time? Is it having loads of time to travel and spend it with your family? Is it having a house in the beach and a car? So what's the opposite of that? Is that failure or isn't it? So we don't really know what is failure exactly, but there are some certain things we do know about failure. Like, it is universal. Since we're born, we fail constantly when we try to learn to speak, to eat, to talk, to socialize, etc. And we don't care. Like, it's just part of it. But slowly, slowly, we build a taboo around failure because failure is something uncomfortable. It doesn't matter if it's a big failure or a small failure, it's always uncomfortable, and we somehow try to delete it from our brains and move forward. And that's a problem because we suffered already. Like, the consequences of that failure are already there, so why not trying to spend a little bit of time trying to find out why is that failing, how could we avoid that failure? And there's one, I don't know if it passed already, there's one of the petrol station, like when you're trying to put 50 euros and then you just put like 51 euros and you have to pay with card. It's so annoying. The good news, though, is that failure is dynamic. So it's not something that lasts forever. It's something temporary and is relative. And success is exactly the same. In being a company and trying to be successful for the sake of being successful is kind of a poor target because it's something that you need to constantly work for. And companies need to understand that things change. The environment changes, companies change and the individuals that form part of that company also change, and we need to adapt to those changes. And in order to adapt to those changes, we need to be innovative, we need to take risks, and when we take risks, we're going to fail. So we need to understand that failure is part of the fuel that makes companies moving forward, and we need to fail on a smart way, and fail fast, and fail cheap. And there's here another quote I really like, which is that failure is not only about taking wrong decisions, it's also about not taking the right ones. And that's Yahoo. In 1998, they didn't buy Google for $1 billion, and then they realized their mistake, and they tried to buy Google for 3. Google demands 5, and they say, nah. Then Yahoo turns down being bought by Microsoft for $40 billion, and at the end, they sell to Verizon for $4.8 billion. So maybe by that time, they didn't take a wrong decision, but certainly seeing the whole picture, they didn't take the best decisions. And I'd like to do an open question. What do you guys think? Should we celebrate failure or shouldn't we? Can you lift your hand if you think that we should celebrate failure? Thank you very much. So the answer is yes and no. We shouldn't be celebrating failure, like in this case. We shouldn't celebrate failure when it's caused by due diligence, by lack of professionalism, by being dumb, by being lazy, etc., etc., etc. But we should celebrate failure and maybe even reward failure when we're trying to innovate, build something from scratch, try to improve a process that is not working 100%. And this is why companies are starting to understand failure as a way towards innovation, and that's one example, which is Google X. I don't know if you have ever seen this logo. It's kind of a secret department of Google, and their offices are not even in the headquarter offices of Google. And the guys that work here, they go every day to work trying to kill the crazy projects they come up with. So if they make the project fail and they kill it, they succeed in their job, so they're happy. And if they don't kill the project, they're even happier because that crazy idea might be something new, something doable and feasible. And they've done loads of ideas, like trying to build a vertical growth farming system to end hunger in the world, which failed because they couldn't grow cereals which were basic for ending hunger. But they have other crazy projects like helium balloons that drift through current airs around the world, providing free internet, free Wi-Fi to remote regions. And this project is still alive, and it has done tens of pilots, and we already have loads of those globes wandering around Earth and giving signals of free Wi-Fi. And failure is a state of mind. As I said before, what it is failure to you might not be failure to me, and what it is failure to me today might not be failure to me tomorrow. And there's a psychologist called Carol Dweck from Stanford University that started doing studies and experiments with children, and she realized there were two kinds of children, children with a growth mindset and children with a fixed mindset. And then she started doing those studies with older children and then with adults, and she found out that those two kinds of people were exactly the same in children and in adults. And people with a growth mindset see failure as an opportunity to grow. They think they are born with certain skills, but if they work hard, if they work enough, they can develop new skills. Those people love challenges, they love trying new things, and they take feedback as something constructive that's going to make them better people and better professionals. However, we have people with a fixed mindset, which see failure as a limit of their abilities. They believe they are born with certain skills, and if they're good at something, they will be good forever, so brilliant. If they're not good at something, They don't even need to train because they don't believe they can develop those new skills. Those people get extremely frustrated when things don't work out, especially if it's something they believe they're good at. Those people take feedback on a very destructive way, and they just stick to what they know. They don't like to try new things. And it doesn't mean that there are only people with a growth mindset or people with a fixed mindset. Some of us are growth mindset for some parts of our lives and then fixed mindset for parts of our lives. So it is important to understand where we are at, especially at work, because it's where we can tend to feel more frustrated, and try to balance the growth mindset wave a bit more, and also to identify the people that have a growth mindset, especially when we are running cultural change campaigns, etc., because those are going to be the ones that are going to impulse those changes. And there are 3 concepts that are extremely related to growth mindset, and I see them as very strong tools whenever we're trying to face failure. One is resilience, which is the ability to stand up after falling. And that's not something we're born with. That's something we need to train. It's a muscle that we need to keep training in order to get good at. And a lot of companies are building idea labs, like a small version of Google X, not for the sake of building a new product or service that can potentially become a new revenue stream, which could be okay, but more to get their employees to spend some time on getting more tolerant about frustration and becoming more resilient. There's another one, which is pivoting. If plan A doesn't work, let's come up with a plan B right away. And I see this as recycling. So we've invested a lot of time and a lot of money in something. We can either throw it to the bin, or we can try to make something new out of it so we don't waste absolutely everything. Pivoting normally has always been related to a product. So we come up with this product, it doesn't work, maybe we can change this and this and come up with a completely different product, but at least we have something. Pivoting has also been related to market. So if market A doesn't work, let's try to test market B. And I also like to see pivoting with human capital. If an employee is not delivering as it should, there's 2 things you can do. You can fire him, or you can understand him and make him change his position. And it doesn't matter if it's a new employee, or someone that's been in a company for 10 years. If it has been there for one reason, if it has passed the filters, it's because at some point he was the person to fit a role. So it's much more intelligent to keep human capital, to keep the talent internally, and cheaper than firing and hiring. And we need to understand that, I said before, people and companies change constantly, and sometimes people need not more responsibility in their roles, maybe less responsibilities. And lastly, learning, which is a little bit of a cliche. There's always this saying of failure is the best teacher, and it's a little bit of true. We need to listen failure. We need to open those spaces where we can freely talk about business failure. And it doesn't need to be, sometimes we do corporate events in big companies, and they tell us, you know what, like, we have 3 speakers, but I don't think they fit because they don't have massive failures, and they didn't lose millions of dollars in the projects they were working on, so maybe we shouldn't do a Fuckup Night. And it's like, okay, you can do a Fuckup Night or you cannot do a Fuckup Night, but it doesn't need to be a massive failure in order to be a shareable failure. The idea is to build those spaces where people can be comfortable about talking about failure, because we tend to forget we're humans working in companies, and humans fail. So we have to take some time to understand what happened, fix if it's fixable, and share the learnings with our teams. There's a sentence we love, which is, failure sucks when it strucks. And then to finish up I'd like to share with you a quote that I always read or remember when things are going terribly wrong or when they're going extremely good, which is never let success get to your head and never let failure get to your heart. And thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you can think a little bit more about business failure.